My duty here to ask if anybody has a question for any one of them already. That's nice.
What is the business model for your Sakha cabs, and where do you see in the landscape of Uber, Meru, and wherever we are? I mean, is it the business models comparable? Or, and the third thing, out of curiosity, can anyone who drives be an applicant? Like, can I apply for being the driver whenever I can, or if I'm, what is the business model? Because I had not really heard about it, so pardon my ignorance, but I'm really curious to know about
No,
it.
interesting question.
Good question.
In terms of a business model, we have these three services. Now, for private placements, as we call it, it's a private license that can apply, which is the license that each one of us carry. For this is largely catering to the households. But to do the cab services, commercial licenses are required. And there are various legal processes towards that. While we enable that for all our women, private placement, private licenses, we start from a learners to private licenses to a commercial license. But then it takes a whole lot of time, and there is a cooling period between getting one license to the other. So hence, the number in commercial driving is less. Also, we give that flexibility to our women drivers to choose whether they want to be in a private placement or in a commercial. Hence, the commercial fleet is lower. But of course, at a commercial level, they do make more money. So the business model is pretty much these three services and have costs associated or the revenues associated with it. But the largest that we have in terms of revenue generation is the cab services, in spite of the smallest fleet. Yeah. So yes, if you want to drive, but as a commercial driver, if anybody who has a private license for a year can actually apply for a commercial license, following certain legal processes, which are easy to do with people like us. But people from the marginalized communities or the urban poor communities where we get the drivers from or where we train the drivers from, there is a minimum educational criteria, which they sometimes do not have, or the government or the transport authority does not recognize it. So these are some of the challenges that we do face.
Thank you. So I'm going to take this to Anisha right now. But Anisha, the reason why I said I want to phrase my question is, when we started off, you said you want to talk about subjects of women entrepreneurship. And when we were having our conversation, you mentioned it's a transition. When you had started off yourself, you did not want to grow in the business just because you were a woman. It was do it on the basis of my ability. But that change has come. And why is that the point? Because another elephant in the room, so to say, is that why should somebody be given opportunity or extra just because she's a woman? You know, why can't she, if you're talking about equality, why aren't you competing with men at equal level? And because there is that transition that you have seen, I'm just hoping that you can tell us a bit on your own experience, on why.
So when I started, it was always about, people should judge me on my merits, nothing else. Why am I being judged on being a woman or a man or anything? I want to be judged on just being what I'm doing right now, my dollar. But the fact of the matter is, the more we look around, there are not enough women entrepreneurs there. There are not enough networks for women entrepreneurs. There's a study that shows that if women and men, entrepreneurs, were put in the same situations, they'd be equally successful. However, women say that the importance of networks and mentors, very, very important to them. And I don't think India has much of that. I mean, overall, worldwide, we don't have enough of that. But definitely in India, for some reason, we do not have enough of that. We really need to have more women networks. We really need to. And so, it changed. Because over time, you realize that if you as a woman entrepreneur are not giving back, right, and not being one of the examples, then you don't deserve to be here. And that is actually what I sincerely feel like all of us, but all of you out there, who are doing, who are professionals, who are working, actually need to give back. That's the only way this whole thing's going to come a full circle. We're actually going to have that happen. The changes happen in 10 years. That we all just need to be proactive and do that. So I'm pretty vocal about it now because I do feel that we need to be talking about it more actively.
So one of the biggest challenges that we are facing right now, especially in this trifecta, is the mindset that needs to shift, that needs to change. There are some of the other challenges that I do want to pose to Pooja right now. Especially in a market like India, if you have to go seeking investment for some of these services, the first question would be, is it genuine or not? I mean, whatever the reason of it is, it comes up. So I want to understand from Pooja, do you face some of that, especially when you're, going out there, trying to make some of this difference. And some of the things you want to do needs capital, right? You need the money to get it going. So when you're trying to reach people for that, does this ever come up where you have to prove that what you're trying to do is really genuine?
In Rajasthan, we have something like 39,753 inhabited villages. So if I go village by village, there are just 14 women in every village. And suddenly the problem seems like a doable thing, like a target that can be achieved. So, as a healthcare provider, we think very differently. And, our challenge is to just go and handle those 15 by 15, so village by village. And in terms of the social impact, and it's something that you can't measure. A person comes crawling to you. I mean, that's just not human. And he or she goes back on his or her own 2 feet. And the dignity that you provide, it cannot be measured in terms of dollars or rupees. The fact that providing a limb in the medical perspective, you are just replacing a lost body part. But if you look at it in the social context, you are providing or you are enabling a person to access inaccessible environment. Because in India, there's as much handicap as there's disability. And disability is medical, handicap is social and environmental. And if you look at it an economic, in the economic context, then by providing an assistive device, you are providing the person access to education, employment, and in fact, acting as a poverty alleviator.
So like as she said, if she was going to look at the entire scale, and this is one situation where you better have a small size to cater to because it's not a happy situation. But in her situation, the way she looked at it is that she broke it with market, she broke it with Women TG, and then she kind of brought it down to, okay, I can handle that. So one solution towards some of these challenges is to break it down to silo and go after the bit that you can handle. And of course, over a period of time, you're handling a bigger picture. So now, Shivani, of course, you've established why you wanted to do this, why Make in India, why women, and from how you've married it to social causes or rather causes, you've been able to do well for yourself as well. But just give us an example. You are a young entrepreneur, a girl entrepreneur. I want to say woman entrepreneur, but what are some of the challenges that you faced on the back of that? How difficult or easy is it to make sense of this?
When we started out, me and my partner, we were both about 24, 25, and initially to hire. So, we'd meet to get people in our company to do, in senior positions, and we'd meet people who'd be much older, and, some of them would be men. And they'd meet us, and they'll come, and they'd be like, oh, are you, one of them, I think, told us that, oh, am I going to meet someone more senior after they'd met us? And then you're like, no. So I think it's just, being a woman sometimes, unfortunately, still is, a lot of people, men, especially older men may or may not take you seriously, may think it's a fashion business, it's being run, out of your garage or out of your home. There are a few people who still ask me that, oh, do you do it from home? And so I think that's something which has really bothered me as a woman. So I think that's been a huge challenge, and but it's something which is very interesting and very unique to Indian women.
All right, cool. And you are addressing that challenge in the way you're...
Absolutely, by the way we design, by the kind of things we do, by the number of things we do. So which is, what we did was to address that specifically was, so now we have about 2,000 styles, and typically a fashion brand has about 500-700 styles, in a season. So, and because we knew that we had to cater to pretty much, everyone in India, so it had to be kind of a mix. So it's all Western wear, but it's a mix of different types of tastes. So, yeah.
All right, perfect. So Akanksha made a point about how she can empirically get a sense on women entrepreneurs and how they are different, better or in whichever sense.